So we will just continue where we left yesterday. This is very loud. I always think it makes a lot of sense to kind of learn overlapped, to not just continue, but to also look back to what we did yesterday and to collect some of the insights that we gained. And also, in order to bring us all on the same level of knowledge, I was thinking it would make sense. I mentioned I called it key vocabulary, the key terms that are usually associated with Hannah Arendt, to just briefly recap or to teach them back to us so that we know what we are talking about and that we can then go into greater depth today with chapter 5. That's particularly talking about what is most interesting for us here, the term action, and what she thinks why action is important for transformative purposes. I would like to draw from you again and to recreate our knowledge together. And we heard yesterday morning in 3 presentations some of the terms that I would like to draw your attention on now and try and puzzle together again with you. And I will just open my slides here so that I can see them, because it's weird always to look back. Who wants to start with a first term that we talked about? What do you remember? Yeah.
Oh my God, plurality.
Plurality. Excellent.
That's not distinctness. It's not difference, but that's plurality. That's different.
Good. Thanks. Yeah. I just reconsider. I think what we do is keep your plurality word, and we start with natality, because I can't, of course, change the order now. So, natality. Who has ideas what Arendt means? Yeah, again.
Yes. So that's the human possibility of being a proper human, not just an animal. So it's not destality, but it's me being able to create, to born new things through me.
Very nice. Yeah. The capacity to be born again, I guess, and to bring about new ideas. Yeah. Who else wants to add something? Is there anything else that you remember? You know what, I try to do it without this, because you're all speaking without, it's kind of weird, and I can try and speak out loud. Okay, who else has something? Alexander? No? Yeah. Let me just try, but you said it all. So it's the capacity for new being, initiate change through action. And I think what is very central, and Marie pointed that out quite beautifully, that natality is more central than mortality, and she really did counter-react to Heidegger. I don't know if you are familiar with that phrase that Heidegger came up with, that kids are kind of thrown into the world, like animals throw their kids. That's how we usually say it. And in German, it's really the Geworfenheit. That's a very key term for Heidegger. And Arendt is saying, no, we are not geworfen. We are not just thrown into this world. We are born. That's one thing she is resisting or counter-reacting to Heidegger. And then she is saying, it's way more important to think about birth and the beginning of a new idea instead of looking at the end of life and sort of looking from that backwards. Yeah. Okay, next phrase. Now we are here, plurality. What else do you remember?
It could only be plurality if it's among actors, because before that it's just mere difference and just different things. So you need to act, and by me acting is actually my newness. And a lot of newnesses, that's a plurality of wholeness. That's
Okay, good. Yeah, we will come back to that too. Yeah. What else? What else do you remember with regards to plurality? Otherwise, I just...
The social political.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's the key for all political life. Yeah. And the fabric of our socialness. Yeah. What I find interesting with Arendt is that she says it's the signature of humankind. It's what makes us human. And she doesn't only talk about outer plurality, so the plurality among us, she also focuses on the plurality in us. So, and there's a little lecture she gave on Socrates. And Socrates is referring to thinking as a dialogical act within oneself. And by the way, that's where the term consciousness comes from, because consciousness from Latin, coming from Latin, means to be in dialogue with myself, to dialogue, to reflect on myself with myself. And that's what very important also for Arendt when it comes to consciousness, because she's saying Eichmann was not able to do that. He didn't have a consciousness in that sense. He wasn't thinking in that sense because he didn't allow himself to reflect on himself in that inner plurality. And I find that a very important thought that's not so strong in our reading, but I think it's very, very important also to understand that's what she means by the signature of humankind. That ability to reflect on us is something that's very much just, something that we can do. That we can step outside of us and think of ourselves. And that's also something that sets us free from ourselves. So that's, I think, a very important aspect. Yeah, and you mentioned that already humans are equal and distinct. That's also very important. So plurality is not separating us because we are all different. We are all the same, and we are struggling with our difference in a similar way. And that's also something you said, politics arise from plurality. Next, banality of evil. Who remembers what that was all about?
I remember we talked about that, but I don't really
Yeah.
get it actually.
No problem, yeah.
Did we talk about it?
Just a little bit. Someone from the class mentioned that.
Perhaps it would be nice to look into this a little bit more today, even because we mentioned it in relation to the Eichmann processes and the idea that the absence of judgment is one of the most imminent dangers of modernity, when people stop to think and therefore surrender themselves to mere ideologies or to even the inability to act, given that action is linked to thinking for Arendt. But how exactly that relationship between thought and action pans out, and how exactly it is linked to the absence of banality, whereas banality itself comes in as a vice of non-judging, I would be interested in hearing a little bit more about it today.
I think that was the key theme in I think it was the first presentation yesterday. Yeah, she's not here today, but I think she will be the person to talk to. A few brief aspects because, yeah, it's not directly related to our text, but it's all part of the development of Arendt's thinking. That's why I think it is important. She came to that very famous term that was highly contested by observing the Eichmann trial. And she observed Eichmann and realized that he was not the devil. And she pointed that out quite clearly, saying that what was so monstrous about him, that's the last point, was his banality. And the fact that he did not reflect critically about the things that he was doing because he became part of a functionality of a bureaucratic machine that stopped him from thinking about the things that he was doing. And that's the banality of it. But that doesn't mean that this was not evil, and that's the misunderstanding that came in with the critique that she earned after she wrote this book, because it is the banality that is so monstrous and that is so dangerous. Because, and that's the next point, that banality of evil comes out of another very important term that she came up with. It's directly linked to that, totalitarianism. Let's maybe collect a few ideas about that. Does anybody know what, because that's the book that made her famous overnight. It's a very, very thick book. It's very hard to read, not just because it's difficult to understand, but because of the content. It's very challenging, I find. And I find it so challenging because it's not just Arendt's analysis of Nazi Germany and Stalinist Russia, it's also so current in many ways.
It's an autocratic regime where the autocracy spreads through to all spheres of life,
Yeah.
including thought, personal matters,
Yeah.
private life, and it's ever intruding.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I guess one of the interesting aspects of the word totalitarianism is indeed that the total or totality of it, and not simply because we have other words, authoritarianism or dictatorship or tyranny, that already describe the unjust exercise of violence or rule, and the powerlessness experienced by individuals who face a government that they can't oppose to. But I wonder whether, did Arendt invent this term, totalitarianism? Was it she who made it?
She made it popular.
She made it popular, at least. Yeah, okay, that's interesting.
Made it a neologism.
Oh yeah, perhaps, yeah, okay. But that's interesting because perhaps it was indeed not present in the discourses by the time that National Socialism was alive, so that only afterwards we have reflected upon this all-encompassingness of modern labor.
It's interesting that this word was created by Mussolini in positive sense.
Okay.
As I remember from your book, totalitarianism is also a state of society without plurality, without rights, without discussion about the main political process of this country. It's unification, maybe, society, also with political system.
Yeah.
Oh, and that reminded me also about a trait that in that every part of society monitors the other. So each human monitors whether my neighbor is applying all of the rules of the state, and if not, he immediately is obliged to kind of surrender him. Or
Yeah, yeah. That's again also reflecting the term total. And another aspect of it also is it brought about a system that totally corrupted people in a way that meaningless actions were possible to destroy certain people. So the totality of how far you can go until you arrive at a place that is producing complete meaninglessness. For example, and that's the example she uses in the concentration camps, it was meaningless. There were nothing produced was there. There was nothing produced. It was nothing coming out of it that was somehow productive also. So it was the complete setup of meaninglessness, of nothingness. It was just destructive. And that total power, that this was possible, that was one thing that she also referred to when it comes to this term. Yeah.
Isn't that concentration camp? They were like hubs for workforce.
Yeah, but they tried. Of course, they used the people for the machinery of the war, but yeah.
Just even right now, those companies are present.
Yeah.
There, for example,
Yeah. But she says utterly, it's running into meaninglessness. That's what she's saying. Because what are they producing? They are just producing things for destruction. It's running into nothingness. That's how she argues in this book.
Can't agree. I just can't agree that somehow because the beneficiaries of that labor is still present as entities like this. Yes.
In the Soviet Union, many concentration camps had tasks as to build a wall, deconstruct the wall, and then build it again, and then deconstruct it again, and then build it again.
Can't agree because the channels, for example, in Russia, there are a lot of those huge irrigation structures or other things were built by prisoners' labor.
Well, I just invite you to read this chapter, because the way she explains it just brought home the point for me how this totalitarian system created work that was utterly unnecessary. It produced something, and again we are here back to the three terms. It produced something, but it was utterly useless in many ways. But like I said, try and read Arendt herself, and yeah, Grisha. And maybe just to that we can still work on our chapter. I tried to summarize a few points that we already said. It was based on her analysis of Nazi Germany and Stalinist Russia. She refers to some ideologies, several isms that took extreme forms. And that's the unlimited terror as a system of rule. It was a bureaucratic machinery. Taking away the plurality and the relationality of people to isolate them, what she says is hindering them to think freely. And that, again, links back to the banality of evil. And yeah, it eliminates essentially spontaneity and plurality and thus political life, because that's what political life is all about. And then I have one positive word, a counter word to that again, that she refers to quite often, and it's a very, of course, very general word. It's world. And for her, when she talks about Welt or world, she means the human-made realm or inter-realm of shared meaning that leads to institutions, regulations, structures. And this shared meaning arises from collective action and speech. And what is very important, especially when we look at her book on revolution, that it provides stability. For her, revolution is not just slaughtering and fighting to bring over or to overcome what you think is wrong and put in place your own ideas. It is really to think about the future and to provide stability based on a shared understanding of our world. and how we want to live together. That is very important. And she was influencing a whole bunch of very important people in the German resistance. For example, Karl Gördeler, who was the mayor of Leipzig and who was a key person together with Dietrich Bonhoeffer and also Robert Bosch. They organized the resistance in such a way that they planned a world for the future after the war, after the terror. And they designed a concept, a political concept that would provide stability so that people wouldn't fall into a chaos after the war is over. And I think this concept of world was just very influential for a lot of people. Yeah.
One comment and one question, because it's interesting that Arendt offers a revolution that is very chaotic and destroying in this nature to build the stable world. And can you please a bit elaborate on collective action and speech? Like, what does Hannah Arendt, like how does she see this collective something? Because I realize it, like I can't remember anything from the reading that can put on something within this topic.
I think it all goes back to the plurality and the relationality that she points out. Remember in that reading that we will look at today, she talks about a web of relationship. And the collective action is something that arises out of this web of relationships. That's why she always tried to put in place Räterepubliken. So she wanted to involve people kind of bottom up in small groups that would come together like we are to talk about the world that we want to live in. And out of this intersphere, we can develop ideas that are already starting to be put in place while we are talking about them. And that's the collective speech that she's referring to. What we heard yesterday, the two men that were talking about the things that they started doing to collectively think of a possible future is already starting to create this future. It's this natality moment that comes out in these things. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So these are some of the terms I think that are important to understand what collective speech and collective action means. Not to work in isolation, but to work together, and to create ideas. Everything that what you are doing, the whole idea of co-creation, Arendt would be happy about that. Yeah, that's exactly what she wants. Okay, now I would like to, like what I said, kind of continue where we stopped yesterday. This next chapter on action is a fairly long chapter. And I came up with a few questions again that I would like you to discuss in small groups. And I put out the questions because the reading is so long. So I think it would make sense if you would pick out a few questions that you would like to talk about and try and refer to the text passages in the reading and try really to work with Arendt's words and try and answer these questions. And it would be nice if you would find somebody in your group again who would then teach it back to us so that we can collectively get a very good understanding of this chapter. I think it's really the key chapter for us. And it worked so beautifully yesterday. I'm sure it works again very nicely. And in the second half or second part of this co-creative space, I would like to then bring it all together, what we did yesterday and what we are doing today, to talk about the power of transformative thinking based on Arendt, but also beyond. And I think what, Marie, I think when you talked about the plan for today, I think we have also a sharing circle in the end. Yes. Yeah. And in the sharing circle, in the end, I would like to tap into your experience and knowledge system to talk about the power of transformation. And we will also refer to all of what we are doing now. So that's what I would like to do now, for you to get back in groups for about, let's say, 20 minutes, talk about the text, and I know it will be 30 for sure. But let's try to do 20 minutes, and then we can see where we are. Pick maybe 2 or 3 questions and talk about them. If the person who is presenting the question wants to use a flip chart, you are welcome to do that, or make notes for yourself, and then you just do it like we did yesterday. Okay? Good. See you in a bit. Let's collect our ideas. What did you talk about? Like I said yesterday, it's not necessary that you answer the question as it stands there, but what did you talk about in your groups? Where did you start? Who wants to start? Yes?
We can start.
Mm-hmm.
Since the beginnings are the topic of the
Mm-hmm.
the action.
Yeah, that's good. So you started with number 1?
We started with number 1, but then we figured out that the interesting question for our group were the third and the fifth one,
Mm-hmm.
about web relationship and space of appearance, and then we discussed that, and
Mm-hmm.
so Max provided us with quotes,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
we kind of stopped on the fifth
Mm-hmm.
one, but it's
Mm-hmm.
very connected to the other one, and especially with the first one. So I'd like to quote Arendt on the action.
Sorry, I have to. It's fine without the mic, right?
Sure.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to quote Arendt on action.
Yeah.
First, before we
Mm-hmm.
go into the space of appearance. So, she writes that to act.
We don't have the same edition, right? You can't.
Same edition is the same.
Is it the same?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. What page is it?
177.
177. Okay. It helps to just read with you. Okay. So whoever wants to.
So she writes that to act, in the most general sense, means to take initiative, to begin. As the Greek word arche, to begin, to lead, and eventually to rule indicates, to set something into motion, which is the original meaning of the Latin agere. Because they are initio, newcomers and beginners by virtue of birth, men take initiative and prompted into action. Then she talks about the creation of man as a beginner himself. Yes, but the key thing is to act is to begin something. It's a new beginning, something very new. So then we try to move to the space of appearance. And just before I read the quotes, I want to share what we were talking about power, space of appearance and power. And I think here is important to say about words and actions, and speech and actions. That Arendt, she says that speech discloses or talks about action, but action also discloses the actor. But yet you need to ask, well, fine, but those are two. But how they can actually be something one thing. What's the one thing? What's the speech and action together? Yes. What's that disclosure, and where we can kind of find that disclosure, and we can find those complete actions of humans within the space of appearance. And then it's an important quote here about the theater, because she writes about the theater. That's at page 188. So she writes, it's a short quote. This is also why the theater is the political art par excellence. Only there is the political sphere of human life transponded into art. Therefore, we can kind of derive from that the actual life of humans is something analogic, in analogy to the theater. Yes, that's a public space, or a space when our actions kind of annotated with our speech acts appear. That's the second. I have a third quote. If I can. Yes.
Okay, briefly.
Briefly, very brief quote. So it's about power. Where power is not actualized.
What side? What page?
Page 200.
Okay.
So it's where power is not actualized, it passes away. And history is full of examples that the greatest material riches cannot compensate for this loss. Power is actualized only where word and deed have not parted company, where words are not empty and deeds not brutal, where words are not used to veil intentions but to disclose realities, and deeds are not used to violate and destroy but to establish relation and create new realities. So from that's the last thing. We can say that the space of appearance is the space where action can be manifested. Though it's then I forgot the name of our friend who comes. Jan was talking about power. So in order for you to have power, you need a space of appearance to present what you are doing, and then you have a common consent of people who see you acting. Yes. So therefore, space of appearance is where the speech and act comes as a whole, and actually can be manifested as something, as human deed, and by that manifestation it appears, and therefore you can draw power from the consent when people do see something appear, if it makes sense.
Yeah. Wow, very well done. Great. That was pretty good how you worked yourself through the questions to combine all the important terms that are standing on the slide here. Very well done. Great job. And we will look at the power later on this afternoon a bit more, and you will see that's exactly that. Yeah. Okay, who wants to tackle another question or add something, maybe a different aspect from what did you talk about in your groups?
I can go. In our group, we talked about question 4, about freedom. And we focused on how Arendt first tries to discuss previous definitions of freedom, on how a lot of currents of thought focus on freedom means sovereignty over your actions first, and then also sovereignty your actions means having control over what those actions produce. But actually she argues that this freedom and non-sovereignty are not mutually exclusive, and she says, okay, let's see if I can find, she tries to argue that the capacity for action harbors it in itself.
Can you say what page, please?
Yeah, sorry, 236. So she poses the question, it's at the end of, or most of the chapter 32, she discussed this. And she says, she first looked at other definitions of freedom, how they have always been equated with sovereignty, and then at the end of the chapter she says, she poses the question whether action has the potentialities which enable it to survive the disabilities of non-sovereignty, and then she in the next chapter she proposes that they do, not because we have control over what happens after, but first because the illusion of an action having like a start and an end is not true. She says that also, I think 233, she actually says that that's the wrong way to judge an action. She says, the reason we're never able to foretell with certainty the outcome and end of any action is simply action has no end. The process of a single deed can quite literally endure throughout time until mankind itself has come to an end. So she actually goes beyond, let's say, for example, existentialism, which already accepts that maybe you don't have control over the outcomes of your actions, but you can still focus on like your life and your lifetime, and you still have sovereignty over it. But she, instead of focusing on the death and your life cycle, she focuses on the plurality, and she focuses that it's in our plurality, in the natality, that we can actually find freedom. And the flip sides to that is that means freedom still has to entail like unpredictability and what's it? It's two things. Irreversibility, like unforeseeable.
Yeah.
And so she promised, and that's like the whole next chapter, that it's through forgiveness and promise that we can like in plurality still like choose action and still find freedom in it. Yeah.
Well done. Yeah. I find that just very important. That's why I was posing that question, to see how she defines freedom, but that she also sees the challenges of it. Yeah. And do you remember what she is saying, how people react to these challenges? Or when you think about that, what do you observe these days? Can you repeat what the challenges are, the flip side of the freedom?
Foreseeable, like unpredictability.
Exactly.
I think she says the only salvation from this kind of freedom seems to lie in non-acting. I think she talks about like people being paralyzed by the fact that they can't foresee what they are starting, even if they focus on the starting.
Yeah, very good. And I think what she's also hinting towards is that people who feel fragile, that's the fragility that she points out, is to cling onto something that is seemingly fundamental. So the whole isms that we observe is often a counter-reaction to that flip side of freedom. Yeah. And that's what she, when you think of yesterday, the human condition that she points out is that problem with action being so floating and so unpredictable, whereas labor and work are more predictable and they are producing concrete, tangible things. However, action has always an open end, but that is also challenging for people. What else? Yeah.
Now we focus mostly on the fifth question. Good. Not so much on the space of appearance, but on the distinction between power, strength, force, and violence. What was interesting for us is that in Arendt, power has a positive connotation. Although somehow it's more usual to think of power as something actually connected to totalitarianism and authoritarianism and so on. Well, for her, power is about the actually potentiality for action realized in and through being together with plurality. She connects this to the Greek city-states on which more or less Western democracies are based. And we mentioned that in German language, this Mögen is related to Macht, is related to Mögen rather than Machen, so the potentiality of being able to do something. and that actually when togetherness disappears, power cannot exist. And what happens with force is actually the isolation versus togetherness. So the tyrant is isolated from others, and this is not about power. And the extreme of it, if I understand it right, is violence, which doesn't have actors. It is like an abstract force imposed, but it's not power. So this was very interesting because, again, most of us have this negative connotations attached to power. What else? And then we also discussed a little bit. And as for strength, something that he says is that with power is the more it is divided, the more power comes, while strength is indivisible and somehow individual. But like, what's the difference between strength and force? I mean, we can discuss.
That was very, very good, and I think that's a very famous definition that comes up at several places. Hannah Arendt's definition of power. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah. And we were also discussing the third question, but not so much in relation to Arendt, but in relation to the distinction between the web and net, and also between maybe Marie. But this is very interesting that in the web you can focus on the
There is a mathematical theory which looks at nets, graph theory, and there are many characteristics how to characterize a graph, a net.
Yes.
And some of those characteristics build on the dots. So you have dots. So for example, I count how many connections does each dot have. And other characteristics, and it's really interesting when you switch between them, are focusing on the connections. So for example, I say how central a connection is. Like if I would cut it, how much would I divide it with, or so on. So there are different, and it's most of the things in the graph theory appear when you switch from one perspective to the other. But that was just playing around.
But we think Hannah didn't know about this. Or it was a synonym.
Well, it's perfectly fine to add on to her thinking and to look at it from different perspectives.
I would like to elaborate on what Lydia said about this distinction. Why would Hannah Arendt understand power as something positive? I mean, in a different work, I think it is called On Authority. It's an article, a long article, but it's still an article. And she works a lot on the distinction between power and authority, and actually about the authoritative needs, so what we consider to be something close to the tyranny or dictatorship, but she, on the contrary, shows that the roots of this concept is very different, and actually bears these positive connotations. And that's how she divides that. And that actually goes through the whole history of political thought from the early ancient Greece to Rome, and then later to the medieval political theology. And that's the distinction between power, which is potestas, and authority, which is auctoritas. And that goes back to her understanding of action, because auctoritas has the same root as the actor. So somebody who starts, who begins. And that's why in Cicero, I think it is a famous quote when he says that the power belongs to people, but authority belongs to the Senate, and that the power is connected, potestas. The power is connected to the roots of violence, of fear, which is in Greek bare force, and then authoritas connected to this starting point, or those who actually makes war. And then she has this interesting connection, I guess, to the ancient Greece theory by Plato. She connects it actually to his personal experience, because as we mentioned yesterday, that in ancient Greek political theory, you have this ambivalence, because there are two modes of powers. The one is the household, and then there is the is considered to be a tyranny, because you have a father who executes, who gives the laws, and everybody else is following that. And then there is a polis, where you have the gathering of these tyrants, and then they need to manage something between themselves, and there is no this kind of hierarchy. And that's on Agora, you have to communicate to each other, and it's a plurality of the equals. So that there was a kind of problem there. And then she says that on Agora there is this kind of mode which people which connects those people is persuasion. So basically, what manages these people to stay together and to have the decisions or judgments is persuasion. But then Plato is disappointed in that after the death of Socrates, because you have this wrong kind of persuasion, and it doesn't correspond to any truth. And that's why later in Plato, he imposes laws as something which is higher than the persuasion, and then so the source of actual power, the source of authority, is always goes either back to history, or it's outside of the community itself. And that's later on Arendt elaborates on that, and then she says that that's very important, that authority itself is not only about executing of power through the people gave up their kind of freedom freely to the person whom they respect, but it's always not about the person itself, but about this kind of authority that always is not present at the moment at the concrete person, but it is always outside of it, either in the history or as in Christian theory, it's God itself.
Okay. Wow, you certainly have some basic, very foundational knowledge about that. And that's true. Arendt is highly or heavily influenced by the Greek tradition. Although in your reading you can see that she's also critiquing it, yeah, in many ways. And yeah. Again, it's really very interesting to, when we try and understand what we are experiencing, and that goes a little back to what we heard in the last lecture yesterday, when it comes to terminology and what we use to express things, to really unfold these terms, because they not just have a meaning, they create meanings in our world, and I think that's very helpful to distinguish these terms that we are, engaging with based on Arendt's work. Yeah. And I find particularly that section important, because for transformation purposes it's very important to have power, but to ask, where does this power come from, and how do we legitimate the power that we are using, and so I think this is very helpful for the topic of our summer school, this section in particular. I'm looking at my watch, and it's I really want to make sure that I stick with my time. I dropped the last part because I think it was more important to talk about the reading and your findings. Is there somebody else? We have a few minutes left who wants to add on. Is there something that you find important that we didn't discuss? Or did you talk about something in your groups that hasn't been mentioned? I'm just looking for somebody else, maybe? Because who hasn't said? Yeah. Yeah, that was a bit of a separate one. Yeah. Did somebody talk about the 7th question? I think I mentioned yesterday that I always find it important to look at philosophy, but to not just leave it as philosophical texts or readings or theories, but also to see what we can make with them. And that's why I posed this question. When you think of Arendt's understanding of action, and that was this whole chapter about, where do you see room for action in your concrete life world, and what hinders it? And maybe you can, go ahead. Yeah.
It was more like a comment on the question. Like
Go ahead.
My personal answer to it is where something that I already mentioned yesterday, but where do I see room for genuine action? Where spaces, very material, concrete, economic spaces enable it, and what hinders it? Financial constraints. When I don't have money to travel here, when I don't have money to actually talk with other people or have a coffee and introduce you to what I'm thinking, I'm hindered. And this very concrete economic constraint of life, and not of action, but of life, is for me the rule maker of human interaction.
Thanks. Okay, so I was mostly reflecting actually on the 7th, and honestly I think that the genuine action for every person, whatever person they are, is actually where there is no society around. But according to Hannah Arendt, she kind of defines the idea of no people being around. It's like she processes various social human beings. So, and we create genuine action as far as I understood from her text, out of like living, like co-living. But as for me, I think genuine action comes where we are truly alone, and we have no people around us to do that. And as we are unhinged, totally. So, as
Can you speak a bit?
Sorry. You haven't heard anything, I'm having something.
Simply remarks.
All right, so I would say that genuine action for me is when you are unhindered by the society or people around, so you are not distracted and you are free to do whatever and say whatever that you want. This is like I think the comfortable way to create something, but it contradicts with what Hannah Arendt says about society and action. She said that the true action comes from the co-living, and it's like very contradiction for me, because I think otherwise, like I think mostly otherwise in this case. And as well, I think the second point for the genuine action in the room is when you have no doubt. Like if you are really sure about your action, then it's like genuine and it can be done. And again, it's where you can enter into the society, it's when you have no doubt. So otherwise a doubt is something that hinders it, because you are not sure about what to do and how well thought it is.
Actually, when you look at different works from Hannah Arendt, she's not far away from you. Because there is this one Socrates lecture that she gave, and when she talks about being able to converse with yourself, that's very important for action too. You know, to have that solitude, these moments where you are with yourself, to confront yourself with yourself, is very important. And she is even saying that in authoritarian regimes, or when people experience totalitarianism, they are hindered to be by themselves. and they are hindered to be, in moments where they can think freely for themselves. And that's also destroying the capacity to act in a communal way. So she's not far away from you. Yeah.
Can I answer?
Yeah.
In our group we have the metaphor. It's like 5 rooms. And I think it's 5 rooms. Like one room for genuine action. And we can think about hinders. But what is genuine action? In the center of this 5 rooms, it's the first room. It's a thinking place where we can think about action, about beginners, the childhood, about kids. When we understand about what is beginning, we go to the strategic level. And if we are thinking about strategic, we need research experience, competence. Yes, and we ask for competence from the researcher. And then from the strategic wing, we put ideas to organize project. And then there we have reaction tool. We have some problem research helps us to make reaction. And what you say, we call it infrastructure. We have to have infrastructure to make genuine action. Not just thinking or just strategic. And it's room of rooms for genuine action. And hinders, as for me, it's norms of culture or political orders which we are living in nowadays. We have to find the rules, preserve some grains, seeds, grains of new ideas.
Yeah, thanks. That's a very detailed plan for action. That's good. Yeah, it's good. It reminds me of the Disney model. Walt Disney came up with this model of a house with 3 staircases, and on the bottom are the critics, in the middle are the realists, and on top are the visionaries. And they all have to work together to create. Yeah.
Critics who are on the second?
On the bottom. The critics and realists and visionaries. Yeah. So for every project, for every action you plan, you have to have conversations with all 3. Yeah. That's what Walt Disney came up. Last set of thoughts, and then we will go on our break. Yeah.
I don't know who was first. I just need really quick. It's just an example that I mentioned in our group as well, and it relates to what hinders us and what is freedom. And I think sometimes art, movies, and or paintings help us to exemplify very abstract thoughts. And I always had the problem with this very not even liberal, but liberalist idea of whatever I do, that means freedom. And this is very much reflected in a movie that I saw. Unfortunately, I forgot the title. It's a Will Smith movie. It's not a great movie, maybe, but there's the introductory scene, and it's an apocalypse zombie movie. So he is maybe the last person in New York, and he's driving like however fast he wants with his car through the streets, right? There's nobody hindering him. There's no other traffic. So he's all alone. He can do whatever he wants, and then he takes his golf bag, and there's the plane which crashed, and he plays golf on this plane. So he has the absolute freedom to act however he wants, because there's nobody, no obstacle to whatever he does. And at that moment, in the beginning, you realize how lonesome he is, and that all his actions actually don't have meaning because they don't relate to the freedom of other people. And that I found a very strong scene that you know, exemplified this idea of Hannah Arendt to me at least.
Just to add to that and to the problem of the genuine action, actually this essay on Socrates, it is of the responsibility and judgment book, I think, right? This where she discusses the consciousness and this dialogue with yourself. In the same book, she says that, as I understand it, the genuine action of conscious people in the Nazi Germany was non-action.
Yeah.
And this is a paradox. And this was a result of them being able to converse with themselves and to be honest and in harmony within this conversation. And this is something to think about.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for underlining that. Yeah.
That's what I wanted to say. I was thinking about the second point and the situation of totalitarian regimes, for example, in society is such a community where a lot of people are frightened of something, of making their genuine reaction to speech with each other and even with themselves. And the non-action maybe is the situation when you can go out of that being of crabs, you know, and to make something against of this society, this which is under this totally frightening and this situation of non-action, but in different meaning. Yes.
I would like to really honor our break. That's why I would like to invite you to talk in the break. But I just pose my questions here. Maybe you want to ponder on them on our walk later on, or even during the day or during the next days. I just found them interesting, and they are also meditation questions maybe that you can just take away. The first one is, when does thinking become transformative? How does this thinking look like? And when did you experience this kind of thinking? And the last one I like the most. How do you know that thinking is transformative? Yeah, how we can put Hannah Arendt into practice, and just to ponder on these questions. And maybe we can talk about them in the sharing circle later on. But now have a good break, and thank you so much for all your effort and the energy you brought into this. And yeah.